Hi. So I didn't really check myself to see what I look like before I got on here. So this is what we've got today. I'm a little under the weather, but um, yeah, I just want to keep showing up and doing these. One of the reasons I was just thinking about this, I was picking up my lunch about how it's one of the things aside from wanting to read the book cover to cover live over this entire year, and we're making some progress, is that I also like seeing. So this is I've got about 4 more weeks in an engagement that's taking a lot of my energy, and it's really interesting to watch the ebbs and flows of how that is impacting me. And big topic for me personally this week has really been about integrity, about value. And if you watch the last live that I did, which is only about 5 minutes long, I kind of addressed this thing about value. And it's interesting because a lot of things, like a lot of teachers or advisors, whoever, a lot of stuff you're talking about is things that you're dealing with kind of maybe at like a more expanded capacity level than the people that you're advising. But seldom is it, seldom are you really in the position to be like even talking with people about stuff when you're like on a completely different sort of wavelength, or even just, I don't know what, like swim lane or whatever you'd call it. I'm not coming up with the right word. But anyway, so for today, I'm going to read, as promised in the thumbnail, the page 47, which is in chapter 3, which is the 4 phases of life. And so for these, I'm having some thoughts about how to even change the structure of this because one of the videos that has performed the best has been techniques and exercises, which is the overview of techniques and exercises. But what I'd like to do once we pass over, and we're really close to finishing chapter 3 here, is crossing over into part 2 with the individual hub chapters and talking more from potentially starting with the techniques and exercises and doing some sections on those, because I think that's like particularly valuable. One of the reasons that reading has been, I think, has been something that I've been leaning more into doing, and doing things that are like pretty much across the board, for contemplation rather than like a full integrated practice for these videos, has to do with the other facets of my life, take actually incorporating those facets. And and that this is kind of like what it appears like that I've left. So anyway, enough about that. I'm going to try to get through this. Um, yeah, and kind of like weigh in on my thoughts on it as they arise. So we'll see. My aim is to actually try to shorten these, but if they don't get shortened, it's just what's going to happen. But I really want to, make these as, I don't know, as good as possible for both of us. So I'm going to start page 47, the 4 phases of life. And I'm going to dip in, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about writing it and why it made it into the book. So to begin, some yogic traditions believe that a life is 1,008 cycles of the moon around the earth, 84 years, and that our life is divided into 4 phases. These phases of life are childhood, 0 to 21 years, early adulthood, 22 to 42, middle age, 43 to 64, and old age, 65 and over. The first 21-year phase is profoundly affected by parents, caregivers, and early social experiences. The phases that follow are opportunities to edit, elaborate, and shift holding patterns from the first 21 years. As I discuss, the truth of our emblem can be inconvenient with its sense of purpose and mission, but it will tend to allow some leeway in childhood and early adulthood. However, the third phase, midlife crisis, usually reveals truths that have been avoided. Much of these revelations and their release are stigmatized as selfish, self-indulgent, irresponsible, and even childish because they release and express unresolved, trapped joy that can be decades old. This so-called crisis usually dies down after an initial period of release and expression and clears the way for greater self-actualization. Yeah. I mean, one note I just have on this is that, like, we tend to, like, have, this sense of, like, decades where we're tracking, big birthdays being ones that end with, like, zeros. But, like, one of the things that I've personally found, and I'm interested whether this resonates with you, is that it's actually been more like the fives that are the ones that feel like stepping through some type of threshold, and certainly with, my own life was the like, getting to about 42 years old, that there really was a shift that, and it doesn't match up with, like, a 0 or a 5, but I felt a material shift to this, and it was interesting to me, and so, like, why this made it into the book was that I felt, that this, like, sort of ancient wisdom that's, like, thousands of years old really matched up with a phenomenon that I was experiencing, but it wasn't necessarily reflected in the cultural narrative. So, yeah. Okay. So the first phase is 0 to 21. The first phase of development begins during the first 21 years of life. Although there is some functional use of all hubs at birth, their capacity increases sequentially, corresponding with the development of the nervous system and maturation of the body. For example, a toddler will be able to use words in the service of getting what it wants, but more highly developed communication and creativity starts around the age 7 or 8 with the fifth hub. The hub chapter in part two, the hub chapters in part two provide an in-depth examination of this phase. Most of this book, the majority of this book is focused on the first phase, which is, like in part two, is predominantly focused on the impacts of the events and as they relate to the development of the hub. And then second phase, which is 22 years to 42, is many of our patterns and beliefs are like contracts or subscriptions that automatically renew. If we don't periodically review the terms, we can spend our lives in personal, social, and cultural contracts that we're used to, but don't serve our best interests. Ideally, in the beginning of the second phase, young adults should transition to early adulthood and take the wheel to drive their own lives. Young adults get their own apartments, begin to have intimate adult relationships, a career, and to find their society, communities that they choose and create. The onset of this phase can be a difficult transition because it's the beginning of surviving alone and doing the work of living one's own life. When entering the second phase, young adults have to start from the bottom after being on the mountaintop of high school and college as seniors. It's humbling to be in the unfamiliar world of adulthood, but with its drudgery and practicality. After 21 years of receiving, young adults are dropped into the deep end of the pool, and when they struggle, they're often admonished and made to feel small by the same system that previously told them how special they are. This, like all transitions, can be difficult and lonely while young adults grieve the end of their childhoods. But this phase is also exciting. It focuses on establishing security, autonomy, purpose, and building a family of one's own. And for many folks that can relate to this is that, these 20 years take people through like having children, building families in this one particular phase of life, and building careers, the early stages of careers. So there is a corresponding first, second, third, and even fourth hub, kind of reconciliation and growth, potential, and it, certainly can happen in this hub. So the third hub is 43 to 64 years old. So the third phase, starting at about age 43, is marked by an assessment of life, how to spend the rest of it. Up until the beginning of this phase, we tend to live our lives with the illusion of unlimited options and time, as if we have money, stuffed pockets, and are deciding what to buy. At middle age, we reach into our pockets and find that half the fantasy money's gone, that we need to act or we may face regret. During this phase, parenting young children is usually winding down, and for some folks who felt undecided about having biological children, there can be a sense that this decision is now final. This is a phase for contemplating one's impact on the world, that is, giving back and making life defining contributions. The previous 4 decades give perspective, and there's more to come. Still young, but also having some wisdom and understanding the consequences of not taking action. It's a beautiful time. I mean, quite frankly, you talk about a phase. I can't look at one of these phases and not see the just kind of the extraordinariness of it. And certainly talking with folks that are in the fourth phase, this is also, especially if these reconciliations and towards the end of the book, um, I think some of this is in chapter 13. I can't remember. I remember it was in 2 places and then it wound up being like edited down to 1. But Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, had developed, in terms of his phases of like a human life, he incorporated these later stages. And there is a lot of overlap in terms of working through like the reconciliations of each phase and even addressing like what are the what are the potential pitfalls of not actually like so in this third phase not really reconciling like between the past and considering the future and setting yourself up to be living in integrity for like who you are and so like what happens as a result of that. So more to come on that later in the book, but interesting nonetheless. And then the fourth phase is 65 and over. So in this phase, we harvest the fruits of our lives through activities we enjoy, family, and the release of regrets and grievances. This is the phase of wisdom, experience, and context, and yet there's so much more to learn and experience. The previous phases were busy and had plenty of distractions. Now a greater emphasis is placed on the upper hubs of connection, truth, inspiration. The contemplation of one's life contribution often becomes a focus. If we have invested in good health, this phase can be relatively calm and enjoyable. If security, physical health, emotional health, connection, community, and personal power are underdeveloped or stuck in holding patterns, this phase can be difficult, lonely, and painful, but it's never too late for transformation. It is never too late. It is never too late. So, all right, how are we doing on time? It's about 13 minutes. So in the last read aloud that I did, I read the top of page 48, which was trust yourself. You know more than you think you do, which was accompanied with a rant about knowing one's own value. And, and this was something that came up a lot in advising meetings that I had this week with people, which was about one of the ways to effectively negotiate for your best interest is to understand that the person who you're negotiating with does not decide whether you're worth it or not. I'll just leave it at that. It's a pretty strong statement. It's pretty legit. So anyway, I'm just going to read this next page and then I'm going to go have my lunch. So, all right, curiosity and the myth of permanent happiness. So what is happiness? An elevated mood, absence of pain, forgetting problems and feeling good. On the continuum of feeling states, it's one of the best, but as dynamic living beings, we should always expect to be moving through the spectrum of different feeling states. Paradoxically, our negative feelings only increase when we believe we should feel differently from how we do, perhaps feeling pressure or shame about not being happier. Happiness is an easy product to market. We part with our hard-earned money to get it and surrender more than we care to admit, chasing illusions of it. I certainly have. The myth of a state of permanent happiness haunts many of us, so much so that when we're unhappy, we may even feel that we've done or are doing something wrong. Instead of wishing for permanent happiness, try cultivating attention and curiosity for all feelings. Enrich your experience of being alive through the good and the bad. Notice how mentally present and accepting you can remain in any situation, how curious you can be about exploring experience in your life by watching and allowing with awe or acceptance. A reduced ability to remain present is often a response to interruptions, which I discuss in part 2. Before naming or categorizing something, try standing in awe and looking, really looking to see that even within pain, sadness, and drudgery, there's an astonishing, wonder inducing experience happening. If something is happening to us, we can get lost and or overwhelmed. But when we see the same scenario in the lives of others, we view them with semi-detachment, even amusement or for entertainment. Now, imagine being able to have this perspective within the power of the direct experience in your own life. Even feelings of happiness can be enhanced by paying attention to the direct experience of them. If we're unafraid of what we may see, curiosity can heighten and become a very powerful tool. If we attempt to create stability in a changing world by remaining rigid in our perceptions and beliefs, we may become a fossil, a living relic of our past. Being walled off and protected with reactions like, that's how we've always done it, or you're overthinking it, if presented with new ways of doing things, blocks the experience of the world as it is. And what time has ever been one without change? Author Stephen Pressfield writes in the War of Art, break through the blocks and win your inner creative battles, that the levels of revelation that can unfold in any art are inexhaustible. There's so much to see and experience. And as we pass through the transitions of life, awareness and presence give us a much richer experience. Yeah. I'm going to stop at that. I think that in many ways that with that, I just kind of like stumbled upon it. So we're ending right now I'm on page 49. And then we just have like a page and a half before chapter 3 is wrapped up. But, if anything, I think one of the most important components of the Parinama Method is revealed in that passage, which is that, the inability, there's a lot of kind of, I think, pretty casual um sort of like I don't know, it's like sort of teachings about staying in the present moment. And I was in a session this week where, when people went around the table, there was this kind of thing like, well, I can't meditate because I can't like sit in silence. And and the thing with this is, I think this really goes back to the idea of like what attention is as it relates to being able to like stay with discomfort, and developing and creating a different relationship with discomfort than immediate aversion. So this is about tuning one's nervous system so that you can actually watch it a bit more, and like kind of come into the experience with what I'd call curiosity, but it creates, instead of like being able to experiencing something difficult by detaching it, it's almost like the opposite, which is being able to experience difficult things by feeling them, and in feeling them, and in like watching them, understanding them, developing curiosity for them, that one's capacity for difficulty is actually expanded. And this is certainly a topic that I'll probably be making and having many, many conversations with over the course of of Parinama Method's life in this world. But with that said, I just want to say thank you if you've come along for the ride for this session. I really, really appreciate you. And in about 4 weeks, I will be really like full bore on this and offering significant amount of like support around this process and materials. But please like the video if there's anything in it that's been encouraging or you found good. Comments are like give me so much life. Thank you, Mira. It's when I see your comments, I can't tell you, it just lights me up. It's just the most fantastic reinforcement of just putting this out there and feeling a response to it. And even if there's stuff that I'm talking about that you have a different opinion about, I'm really interested in in hearing what you have to say about these topics as they relate to your own experience. So anyhow, again, please like the video, subscribe. It's really encouraging, and I can't wait to be seeing you in the next installment. Again, thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.